Hi there and welcome back to my channel. This is Sean, the Honest Book Reviewer, with another book review. In this video we're discussing How to Sell a Haunted House, written by Grady Hendrix. This is comedy horror. Now, comedy horror is not my favourite subgenre of horror, but the concept of this book is good. I really enjoyed that concept and I don't mind that whole haunted doll trope. I like that in horror. I find it quite chilling and I find it interesting. But this book, I don't know, I kind of felt like people running from possessed Muppets. That's what it felt like. Think Kermit with a bad attitude. That's what it felt like in this story. And it went on and on in certain scenes like that. And when that happened, it did kind of ruin those horror moments for me, some of them anyway. But other horror moments, when there wasn't so much comedy in those moments, that was very strong indeed. I do like the overall concept and the overall story. It's just adding so much comedy into it does take away some of that enjoyment for me. So in this book, it's all about a brother and sister, Louise and Mark. The start of this story, Louise finds out her parents have died in a car accident. They don't get on at all. They're very different people. They lead different lives, have different desires and needs. They're so different, and a lot of this book is about that conflict between them. The conflict isn't always written seriously. The conflict has comedy elements there as well. And sometimes it's not so much conflict. Sometimes you think they're getting along. But that conflict is always in the background. And it feels very juvenile in a way. It feels like they're teenagers. They haven't escaped from being teenagers in the way they interact with each other. That's what it feels like in this story. So in some ways it makes them feel less than their age in this book. And I don't know what I think about that. I get the whole conflict thing. You know, siblings don't always get along. But I just don't know about the whole comedy element coming, so strongly in the story between the two so often. In this book, Louise is in for a shock because she finds out Mark inherits everything. The house, money, everything. The only thing Louise inherits is her mother's art and her mother's puppets. So Louise thinks she'll get one up on her brother by taking her time sorting through all the art and puppets in the house and taking her time taking them out of the house because it can't be sold until she's finished. So cue more conflict, more anger, more fights in the story, a few little comedy things going on. But it's that moment when the horror starts. The big horror moments start in that moment when Louise is first in the house going through the art. I won't tell you what happens, but it's when I found the first engaging and gripping horror elements in this story. And it's strange the way this is structured. So we have some really great moments in that present day narrative. Then it goes back in the past a bit. It goes back in the past for a small section where Mark is telling Louise about something that happened to him in his past. That's interesting in a way, it adds more backstory to the horror. So I don't know why it was so small in the story, because that backstory could have been so much bigger in the story. It adds a lot more horror elements and more gripping elements, more chilling elements in the story than a lot of the things that happen in the present day narrative. That's my view anyway. I think that backstory should have been bigger. That backstory was a big part for me in this book. What they learn from that backstory and the present day narrative is something's wrong with the house. If they want to sell the house, and by this stage, Mark decided that he'll share all the proceeds of the sale with his sister. They're getting along at this stage in the story. If they sell the house, they need to first read what's going on in the house. That's where more horror things start in this story, and also more comedy things as well. But overall, I like the whole concept of this book. The author, Grady Hendrix, also adds a lot of comedy into there as well. When the comedy is strong, it takes my engagement away, my enjoyment away from the book. When the comedy is toned down a little bit, I find that horror element much stronger for me, and I engage with the story more. I find the scenes more chilling and gripping when it's not trying to be funny as well. And I know the author adds a lot of comedy into his stories, into most of his stories anyway. I've read books before by this author where the comedy is not so strong, and I enjoy those more than when the comedy is stronger. One thing that bugged me a lot though is the end of this book. At the end there's big moments, huge moments, destruction, violence, a lot of stuff goes on at the end of this book. And what bugged me is there are no questions about that. No one questions what went on. We have authorities arrive, they arrive to the house, but nobody questions what went on in the house, in those scenes, those moments. That was strange to me. It takes away a lot of realism in the story. But of course, it's horror and fiction. There are things going on in this book that aren't real. But it's trying to say the world is happening in this story is real. So for us to believe This world in this book is real. We need questions asked about things when they're so huge in the story. That bugged me a lot in this book. In this book, we have two major characters, Louise and her brother Mark. So first off, Louise. She's consistent as a character. She feels real. She thinks of herself as better than her brother all the time. But she can be petulant. She can act juvenile like a teenager. She can be just as bad as her brother sometimes in this story. But she's engaging in this book. I like her in the story. She has some good moments in the story as well. She feels fairly well rounded. Sometimes she feels a little bit one-dimensional sometimes in the story in certain scenes, certain moments, but overall a good character in this book. Mark is well written, he's consistent, he does feel real, but I think in real life, if you knew a character like this in real life, he'd be so frustrating. He feels so flighty, so flaky. He's all over the place in this story. That's okay, it's his character in the story. That makes him consistent and real. But in a certain way, he feels like a stereotype as well. Because he's so extreme in certain ways, he doesn't feel that well-rounded to me sometimes. But he's consistent in those ways as well. So he's well written to a degree, I think. But I just want different highs and lows with him sometimes. But a good character anyway, but it'd be so frustrating if you knew a person like this in real life. This book has a great horror concept, some good horror moments, but it's those moments when the comedy is stronger in this story where I disengage with the story. I need my horror to be a bit less comedy, a bit more kind of old school horror, like typical horror. That's my favourite type of horror. But this comedy horror, I don't know, maybe I'm not the right audience for it, but I do enjoy the plots. I do enjoy the concepts this author does. Just that comedy element sometimes just spoils the read for me a little bit. I rate this book a 3.5 out of 5. Good concept. I like the overall story. There's some good strong horror in there, but those moments of comedy, again, just kind of spoil some of it for me. On my channel, I review many horror books. If you enjoy horror, check out my channel and subscribe. On the screen now is a link to a video for another book I'm sure you'll enjoy.